Welcome to CBS Sports HQ. I am Jenny Dell. Now, the NFL season is officially over with the Super Bowl complete. The Eagles parade happening on Friday. We turn our full attention to NFL free agency. And you best believe our Pete Prisco has been working on his top 100 list for weeks now, scouring over every name that's about to hit that free agent market. Looking at his top 5 here, giving that top spot to quarterback Sam Darnold, a man who impressed beyond expectations with the Vikings. Now, next up for Prisco, although he admits T. Higgins might be the best player available due to his position, placed him at number 2. We're going to move on now, fresh off a championship win. Eagles linebacker Josh Sweat at number 3. And coming off that Super Bowl loss on the other side, Chiefs guard Trey Smith at number 4. At number 5, we got tackle Ron Stanley blocking Lamar Jackson's blind side, and he's rounding out this list of the top 5 over here. Now, when it comes to expanding to the top 10 free agents, we got a lot of defensive players here on this list, except number 7 right here at center. We got Drew Dahlman at age 26. You can imagine that it's going to be a pretty active market for him. Now, you can find all of Pete Prisco's top 100 lists on CBSSports.com. And lucky for us, we have Pete Prisco in studio with us today alongside Danny Kanell, who is ready to break down this top 100 list. And when you take a look at this list, we're going to go through all 100 at some point. But today, looking at one in each category of 10, making it fun to kind of go through some of the guys at the top, some guys a little bit further down the list. And we're going to start.
I'm going to put you in the top 10 after your walk and
Thank
talk.
you.
That was
Thank
pretty
you.
impressive.
Yeah.
Listen, that's why I get paid the big bucks.
There you go.
Just kidding. Not at all. All right, we're going to start with the number 1 guy on your list, Pete. And we've talked about it before. This is a little painful for you because you wanted T. Higgins at number 1, but due to the position, you put quarterback Sam Darnold out there.
Yeah, the value of the position puts him at number 1. And when you look at him, he played to being the number 1 free agent until the last 2 games of the season. And there's always that factor of, did he become Sam Darnold again? And there's concern about that. But I do think he's going to still have a market. I don't think the Vikings are going to bring him back. I think he's going to end up on the market, and the Raiders are a real possibility for Sam Darnold.
I think this is a really curious case because I'm with you. I'm a little bit skeptical of Sam Darnold. Was this a one-off? Because we've seen that happen over the course of history where it was a great situation. Kevin O'Connell's great with quarterbacks. Got a couple great receivers in Justin Jefferson on the outside, Jordan Addison. But when things weren't so great, man, it can fall apart pretty quick. The season in its entirety was awesome. I'll be really curious because I get worried if he goes to a place that's a little bit more of a rebuild or somewhere asking him to lift the level of everyone around him. I think he needs really good weapons around him and really good protection. And is he going to be able to find that with the market that's out there for him? So either way, he's going to get a nice payday. But I worry a little bit more about Sam Darnold regressing somewhat in the rest of his career.
He is Exhibit A on my lesson. Let's see if it plays true if you are what you are.
Right.
Usually you don't get out from underneath something you've become to become something else in the National Football League. So I think if he does regress again and doesn't play that well, then you are what you are.
So you're saying that the start of him in Minnesota was just a blip on the radar. It was just
Maybe.
Good luck.
See,
it was right place, right time.
If I was him, Jenny, I would be begging the Vikings to try to figure it out. But they've got J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings. And I would say, like, what can we work on? What type of deal?
Because it's good for him to stay there.
Yes, I think for his career, that's his best chance to sustain the success
Correct.
he's had. But I don't think that option's going to be there.
I don't either.
Yeah.
If it is there, then J.J., what's he supposed to think?
Well, again, that's like an issue for him.
You could also say, hey, look, maybe we'll just tag Darnold and keep J.J. on the bench for a year and let him learn why he's healthy from Sam Darnold and then let Sam Darnold go. There's a lot of things at play here. But if you're Sam Darnold, you want the mega deal.
Yeah.
Go get your money.
Guaranteed.
Look, if you get guaranteed money and you don't play well for 3 years, at least you got the guaranteed money.
Yep.
Take the money when you can get it.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. All right, we're going to go to that next list, and we're looking at 11 through 20 now. We're going to circle number 12 on your list. We have Chris Godwin, wide receiver for the Bucs over there. Started off 2024 with 50 catches, 7 games, but then he broke his left ankle. He is expected to be back in the 2025 season, Pete.
Yeah, and again, the fractured ankle is always concerning, and he's not a kid anymore. I mean, he's not old, but he's not a kid anymore, so there is always concern there when a guy does suffer suffer an injury, will he be the same player? Knowing Chris Godwin the way I know him, the way he works and puts himself out there and takes care of his body, I think he'll be back to being Chris Godwin. So I think the value is still there. The guy was on a tear, I mean, to start the season. He's a slot receiver. Remember, they moved him outside the year before. Wasn't the same player, moved him back inside, and he started to flourish again as a slot receiver. So any team looking for a slot receiver should go get Chris Godwin.
I think he's one of the more underrated receivers, maybe in the NFL, because he's always kind of played second fiddle to Mike Evans. But I am concerned about the injuries. He's only had 3 seasons where he's played every game. There's also an ACL tear that's in there in the course of the history. And then this more significant one this season, you wonder how he comes back. I think he definitely provides a presence, though, in the slot, like you mentioned, that teams like the Raiders who are looking for weapons, the Patriots to add around Drake May, there's going to be some teams. The market for Godwin is going to be healthy.
All right, we're going to move on now to 21 to 30. So we're buzzing through this list, looking at Byron Murphy now, corner for the Vikings. Now, coming to the Vikings 2 years ago, he's been a solid starter on their defense, Pete.
Yeah, and really has improved since he's gone to Minnesota. And that's a tough defense to play in. You know, Brian Flores is a coordinator who likes to get after the quarterback. You got to match up in some man-to-man situations, a lot of them, in fact. And I think he's done a really good job with it. And so his value has gone up. This is actually, surprisingly, a really good corner class in free agency. From top to bottom, there's a lot of guys out there, and normally these guys don't hit the market. So when you look at it again, he took a prove-it deal. Now I think he's looking to get paid. I think he will get paid. I think Murphy's on the verge of getting a nice contract.
That prove-it deal, worked out perfectly for him because he's only 26 years old. He's able to hit free agency for the second time, which is pretty rare at this age. And I think you're totally right. I mean, he had 3 interceptions a year ago, 6 this past season. You want to peak at the right time, and you want to have this sort of career year when you are able to hit the market. I'll be curious to see what Minnesota, if they're potentially in and bringing him back, or does he go someplace? I thought Washington needs some help in the secondary. The Giants need some help. Cincinnati. Again, I think there's going to be significant interest in Murphy out there in the open market.
And Gilmore, the other corner, is also an unrestricted free agent, as is Jack Griffin. So the Vikings have cornerback issues, so they might make a push to bring him back. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned 26, because that's the target age. That was taught to me a long time ago.
26 or 27?
26. That's the age. You'd like to see your team average 26 in terms of years, and you'd also like your free agents to be 26 because
get some time left.
What went into this statistical discussion?
Because when you're when you get past that, you start going the other side. Huh. That's the prime year right there, 26.
Don't get old.
Tell me about it. That was a long time ago for me.
Jenny and I are in our prime.
No, you're not.
Yeah,
no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're long past that, Danny.
We're right there. We are right there. You mentioned those 6 interceptions with Murphy. Those tied for the 3rd most among all corners this past season. We're going to look at Bobby Wagner now, linebacker with the Commanders. He's coming in at number 35 on your list. You think at some point, we're talking about age, that he's going to start slowing down, and then he goes out and has the season that he does for the Commanders, Pete.
Yeah, and I really thought this was the year he would slow down, and he didn't. He was as good as he's been at any point in his career. I mean, just a little tad tick off in terms of the speed to get to the football, but I think he makes up for it now with his mind and his ability to read things. And so he was a big part of their defense. I think ideally they'd like to have him back, maybe get him on another 1-year deal or 2-year deal, because I don't think there's going to be a real giant market for an aging linebacker, but I do think he liked playing in Washington. I think they're building to something. It would make a lot of sense.
I think this should be Adam Peters. One of his first priorities is figuring out what the future holds for Bobby Wagner. He's one of those guys I don't really feel like you can put a price tag on. Now you have to in a cap area. You don't want to overpay for anybody. But from a leadership perspective and a locker room that does have some young pieces, like a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels, I think the Commanders are in a position where they should put all the chips on the table, go all in while you have Jaden Daniels on his rookie contract, while you have that money to spend, and bringing back a player like Bobby Wagner, I think is one of those first steps. Then you kind of go hit free agency and go spend a little bit and try to go all in now where this window looks really right.
And they have a ton of cap room.
Yeah.
I mean, they can go out and spend and spend and spend. I'm with you. I'd bring him back as well.
Unlike some other teams out there, we were talking about age. Bobby Wagner turning 35 this year. That's much more in the wheelhouse of where Danny and I are.
That's right.
Almost right there. All right, we're going to look at number 41 now, and that is Amari Cooper, wide receiver with the Bills, landing in Buffalo last season in that trade with the Browns. Played in 8 regular season games with the Bills, had just 20 catches and 2 scores. It got worse in the playoffs, Pete.
Yeah, well, he was hurt. And they
That
kind
adds
of
to it.
didn't really come out and say that, but then they hinted at it after the season. He had the one wrist injury, but I think there was more at play here. The other part of that equation is he's always been a #1 alpha receiver, and when you go to Buffalo, there really isn't a #1 alpha receiver, in large part because that's not the way Joe Brady plays the offense and doesn't cater the offense to a #1 wide receiver. So, they got away from that. Remember, Stephon Diggs was the #1 wide receiver. He complained about not getting the football. It led to problems, and so they tried to get away from that. They knew they needed help, so they went and got Cooper. It didn't work out. Now, what do you do with him? If you get him healthy, he's 31, so he's not a kid anymore either, so that's a concern as well.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like you're getting towards the back end of Cooper's career, like that 31 age. As you mentioned, the trade clearly didn't work out results-wise. I think he's probably looking at shorter-term deal, to try to maybe parlay this into a bigger one. But at this age, the next one may not be better than this one, but you want that opportunity. Do you think you go back to Dallas, potentially, reunite out there where he had some success? Team like Arizona looking for, just some veteran presence out there at the wide receiver.
He'll have a market.
But it's not going to be a top-tier market, correct?
No, I don't think it will be either. And here's the other thing about Buffalo. They need speed. Everybody plays them, they don't scare anybody down the field, and he doesn't scare anybody down the field. So I think they need to move on and maybe find some speed outside.
There's always a market for quarterbacks. That's what they say, especially if they have shown a little bit of skill, some success in the league. And that brings us to number 51 and Justin Fields. So obviously things did not work out with the Steelers. There's a lot of questions about where he stands as far as the market goes. He's on your list at number 51 there.
Because I think he's intriguing. He's only 26.
Yeah.
I mean, the age is right. And he's also flashed last year at times when he played for the Steelers. I thought he did some really good things. When they put him in packages later in the season, he did some really good things. He never complained. He could have complained. He could have moaned and groaned about putting the old man in instead of letting him play quarterback. But he didn't. And I think that was a lot of people around the league I talked to were impressed by the way he handled the whole situation. And you can get creative with him. I think he goes back to Pittsburgh. I think if the Steelers are smart, they'll bring him back. And if you want to, try and cater the offense to him. What are your options if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers? You're not going to be in position to draft one of the top guys. Do you like the rest of the free agency market? I mean, look at it. Is Aaron Rodgers, when he gets let go, is he going to go play in Pittsburgh? Maybe. But I think you bring back Fields and try and build something around him.
I think you do, too. I did see a mock draft where they had Jackson Dart potentially going to them at 21 to the Steelers, maybe some competition for Fields. I think he's at a really crucial point for his career. Like what direction it potentially goes. This decision could impact whether he turns into a franchise quarterback again, where he's able to have one of those big paydays and turn himself into a 8-10-year starter, or is he relegated to a guy that had a lot of potential that just kind of turns into a backup then? And I think one of those decisions is staying in a system that he's comfortable with, where even they built those packages for him when he came in with Russell Wilson. Why not expand on those? And when I see a player like Justin Fields, I think he should call up Jalen Hurts from the Eagles this offseason and say, hey, what did you do? Obviously, from the mental perspective, character perspective, he's been through adversity, same types of things. Like, how did you handle that personally? But then what did you do to develop yourself and turn yourself into the passer that you did? Because I think there's similar skill sets, and Jalen Hurts has done a wonderful job turning him into a quarterback that is a Super Bowl champion now. So I would want to know, what do you want? What he needs to work on his game. He needs to develop as a passer, and I think part of that, and there's a system that fits Hurts in Philly. Now you've got that potential to do it with the Steelers. What can you do to turn yourself into the player that you can be?
Well, they got to run the ball better. I mean,
Right.
it helps. Jalen Hurts is helped by Saquon Barkley, and the offensive line is the best in football. Pittsburgh they're going to have 2 first-round tackles starting next year, so they're building something on that offensive line, but they have to run. They didn't run the ball very well last year, and if they run the ball, it helps the quarterback. Yep. That's what's helped Jalen Hurts.
Take us kind of inside the locker room quickly, Danny. Like, as a former player, is that something that goes on often, calling someone that's had success, been in a similar situation than you?
Yes, I think there's a fraternity of sorts. I think now it's probably grown even more so than ever before. I mean, there was a little bit more of competition, and guys are, kind of distant, and that was the enemy if it was on another team, a rival. But today's player, they have relationships. They work out in a lot of the same, facilities in the offseason. They share agents and social media. It's just easier to connect to players. And I do think that a guy like Hurts actually would appreciate a player like Fields and be willing to help him. And before, there was guys who were very protective, hyper-competitive. You didn't want to share some of your trade secrets, so to speak. Now I think players are way more willing to do it.
And it doesn't seem like Jalen Hurts would be the type that wouldn't take a phone call.
Oh, absolutely.
Seems like
he would
the
love it.
nicest guy out there. All right, we're going to look at number 62 on Pete's top 100 list of free agents. We got Levante David there, linebacker for the Bucs. There is a chance, 35 years old, that he could be done. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, and just in talking to him last year before the season, you know, why he came back, he just said he felt he wanted to give it another shot. But he also realizes that there's time for family, and I start getting that impression at times from him that he's leaning in that direction. He said some stuff after the season to the Tampa Bay media about that type of decision he's going to have to make. But look, he still plays at a high level. He's not as fast as he once was, and he's been one of my all-time favorite players. Look, he was the first better than captain of my team way back in the day, something he never forgot. And I've always, you know, watched him and talked to him, and I love the way he plays the game. He's still a big-time playmaker. He's just not as fast. And not as fast, that means you don't cover as well. And his coverage skills went a little bit last year. And they suffered a little bit at linebacker because the position next to him wasn't very good either. So I do think he can still make a lot of plays. They'd like to have him back. Yeah. But a one-year deal, and does he come back?
Right. He's had 2 years in a row. He's won back-to-back one-year deals. So you're probably looking at another one of those. I would put this similar, it's, you know, like the Bobby Wagner situation where players, they're kind of, like you figure out the numbers, you just want to find out, do they want to come back and be a part of your organization? This is a Bucs lifer who has had an incredible career. His 5.5 sacks were the highest of his career. Last year he had 3.5, led the team in tackles, so it's still there, but you need to find out his mindset. Are you going to run it back one more time? Like, do you have emotionally, mentally what it takes to keep this thing going and make one last push for a potential championship run? The thing I think that maybe it makes it attractive for Levante is the fact that Baker might restructure. They might open up some cap room. Mike Evans is under contract. So they did have a good season last year. So maybe you get a taste of, man, could I get it one more run for that Super Bowl run potentially in an NFC that looks pretty open? Why not? So I think that's what you're trying to pitch
He's a
to him.
pro's pro, and you love to have those guys in the building.
He led the Bucs with 122 tackles last season. You think about guys like that and the importance of family and the fact that after the season ends, your body's shut down, you're exhausted, you miss your family, so it's hard to make these life decisions.
Yeah, and then they go home for a month and
they're
go,
like,
get me out of here. Get me out of here.
I mean, I think that happens to a lot of former athletes too. They're like, wait a second, did I say I was going to retire? I was just kidding there. All right, we're going to look at number 73 on the list now. We have Najee Harris, running back for the Steelers, 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, the only back in the league to do so in that span. He also hasn't missed a game, so just healthy as can be. That's not common for a back, Pete.
It's not common for a back, and you give him a lot of credit for that, but you also might ping him for that because he's got a lot of wear and tear on your body. I mean, it's a double-edged sword when you're a running back. If you play a lot, you get carries, and you know, you get these yards because he is the only guy to have 1,000 yards in a row in 4 straight seasons. Then you look at it, you go, oh wow, that's great, but it's also wear and tear on your body. So he's a plotter. That's what he is. He's going to give you the tough, hard carries. He's not going to have breakaway runs. That's not who he is. They didn't block very well for him last year, in fairness to him, and he still found a way to get 1,000 yards. But you look at the running backs, and you guys know how I feel about running backs. You draft them, you run them in the ground, you get another one.
Done with them.
Well, they've kind of run them into the ground a little bit, and now they're probably ready to cast them aside.
I had him described as a workhorse. Like that is the very, you said a plotter, same exact thing. The explosiveness isn't there that I think the Steelers probably want to get to. You saw Jalen Warren provide that somewhat for him. You know, I think would probably appreciate his durability and the workhorse aspect of it is Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I think that could be a potentially good fit. We know they want to run the ball a lot. They can feature, maybe even, you know, get him a spell at times. It'll be interesting to see where J.K. Dobbins ends up. But I do think Harbaugh, who is committed to the run, wants to have a physical-based approach. They have 2 pretty good left tackles, young quarterback. I think he would appreciate a guy who's pretty much certain to give you 1,000-yard rushing. That's what he's got his first 4 years. I think could be a pretty good fit.
That one makes sense.
Okay, real quick on this last one. We just talked to Justin Fields. We got to ask about Russell Wilson, who is number 90 on Pete Prisco's list. 36 years old. Is he anything more than a backup at this point, Pete?
I don't think so. I'll be honest with you. I put him on here because I know there's a lot of quarterback-needy teams. I had him off, put him back up, moved him back down, then put him back in at 90. I think he's a backup. I really do. I think the moon balls, that's the big part of his game, but that's about it. He doesn't throw it in the middle of the field at all.
Best case scenario, bridge quarterback. You know, to kind of hold a placeholder.
For 3 games?
Potentially, maybe
Yeah.
that's it. You know, and then if your rookie's really struggling, at least you kind of have a floor of what you could be. But it looked so, you know, it looked like, okay, Tomlin made the right decision to bench Fields, we talked about earlier, and then it just completely fell apart. You saw some of his weaknesses. It does look Father Time has caught up to him. It's not catching up to us, Jenny.
No,
it's caught up
we're
to Pete
looking
already.
great.
It hadn't caught up to me. You guys got a couple. You got a long way to catch me, guys.
That is true.
How many Super Bowls was it, Pete?
36.
36 Super Bowls. Unbelievable. Okay, we're going out on the 91 to 100 here. Some big names on this list as well. I know how much Pete Prisco puts into doing his top 100 list. I know we're going to also be breaking it down quite a bit over the next few weeks on CBS Sports HQ, but you can get that whole list right there on the website. Travis Kelce. Have you heard of him before? Just finished his 12th season with the Chiefs, announced that he will take a little time before deciding his NFL. Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. We're talking Pete Prisco's top 100 free agents, looking at the top 10 list right there. And in this segment, figuring out where these guys might land. Free agent landing spots. Pete Prisco joining us now here on the desk. And looking at that number one spot, we're going to go through the top 10. We got Sam Darnold at quarterback. He really resurrected his career with Minnesota. And it went so well for so long. And then those last few games, you're like, wait, which quarterback am I looking at? Where do you think Sam ends up? And what do you think the future holds for him?
Well, you look at the quarterback-needy teams, and the Raiders are at the top of that list, and they have a whole new situation there with Vegas. So I think he would make a lot of sense with the Raiders. Again, what's the number? How much is it? Is it the Baker Mayfield contract?
What is the number?
$40 million, I think, a year. But how you structure it, that remains to be seen. I don't think he's getting a 5-year, $50 million deal. I think maybe 3 years, 40. Baker Mayfield deal plus, for inflation. Maybe that's what he gets. So I do think he'll hit the market. I don't think the Vikings will bring him back. And I think the Raiders, if you look at their quarterback situation, they need to do something, and I think that might make some sense for them.
Do you think that that's the best for his future, is either having an option to stay in Minnesota or go on to a team?
I think the best thing for him would be to stay in Minnesota. The problem is, I don't know if Minnesota wants to pay him that money, and you have to get the money when you have an opportunity to get it. So when you go get, wherever you go, look, everybody always says it's a bad situation. Look, a bad situation with $40 million is a lot better than a good situation with 20. I can tell you that right now.
I was going to say, a bad situation with like $40 is better than
a good situation later in life. I can promise you that.
That's true. All right, we're going to look at number 2 on your list, and that's T. Higgins, wide receiver with the Bengals, of course. And I know you wanted him to be number 1 just because of the talent that he is, but the position, you had to bump him down to number 2. Where does T. Higgins end up?
It's almost unfair to T. Higgins because he's considered the second receiver. And when you talk to people around the Bengals, yeah, there's number 1. He's a clear number 1 in Jamar Chase, but this guy's 1A. And so what do you get when you get him on the market? Are you getting a true number 1 wide receiver? And I think you are. He's 26 years old. He's in the prime of his career. So if he hits the market, there's going to be a lot of teams looking for him. Guys like the Packers, the Patriots, maybe even Jacksonville. I think there's a lot of teams that will be interested in him. I don't think he's hitting the market. I think Joe Burrow out there pushing to keep this group together, and I think they're smart if they do. You see what the offense is when he's not there. Chase is great, but when Higgins isn't there, it's a different offense. So I think they franchise him and keep him around.
You want him staying with the Bengals. All right, we're going to look at number 3. This is a guy that's going to be celebrating on a float on Friday. We have Josh Sweat out there, defensive end for the Eagles, Super Bowl champ. Does he stay with the Eagles? Does he move on?
Credit to him because he took a lesser contract on a 1-year deal last year and gambled on himself and won big. And he led the team in sacks with 8 during the regular season, didn't get any in the playoffs, and then on the biggest stage, here I go, I'm going to go make some more money. So I do think he gets onto the market. I think when you look at it, I definitely think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should take a long, hard look at him. They need help rushing the passer. Yaya Diaby, really good pass rusher. Probably doesn't get the sacks that he will eventually get last year. He'll start getting them. You put another guy next to him, you go across that line, Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, all of a sudden, what do the Bucs have? They have a 4-man pressure group that can rush with 4. That's how the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I think teams are going to try and emulate that.
Looking on the other side, we have the Chiefs guard, Trey Smith, 26 years old, powerful player. Didn't come out on top when it comes to this past Super Bowl, but overall such a great skilled player out there.
He's a physical mauler, and if you're the Chiefs and you look at your offense, offensive line, you look at what just happened. Yeah, Tooney had to go outside and play left tackle, so that weakened them. Caliendo couldn't play guard. But when Tooney's playing left guard, and you know, you have Creed Humphrey at center, you have Trey Smith at right guard, they're the strongest group in the middle of the line of any team in the league, and I think they want to keep that together. So I think he goes back in some form or fashion. They'll find a way to work it out and get him back in Kansas City.
Keeping it with the line and talking about a tackle too, Ronnie Stanley, his sole job protecting Lamar Jackson out there with the Ravens. Injuries have been a problem with his past. Where do you think his future holds?
I think he comes back. I think the Ravens will find a way to keep him. Again, it depends on where the money goes, but when you look at him, when he's healthy, he's a good player, and he's a big part of what they do. Health, you mentioned that. That's always a key for him. Some people say, well, he played every game last year. Well, it's a money year for him, so you wonder about that as well, but I do think that they find a way to bring him back.
Another defensive player that you have with the Eagles, that's Milton Williams at number 6 on your free agent list. Where does Williams go?
Williams is going to have a better market than people think, even before the Super Bowl. We saw him play really well in the Super Bowl, but you know, even before this game, I was working on this list. I had him in my top 10. Underrated player, talking to people around him, great work ethic. And I think Arizona needs help in the middle of their line. I think the Arizona Cardinals would be a great destination for Milton Williams.
A lot of defensive players on your top 10 list, but at number 7, we have Falcons center Drew Dahlman out there, just 26 years old, still a lot of time within that body that he can go out there and compete. Where do you see him?
And he got hurt last year, but before he got hurt, he's playing really well. But when you look at him in this group, he's the top center. And everybody's looking to improve the middle of their line. All you got to do is look at the Eagles. Look what the Eagles did with a good offensive line. Improve your line. I think the Bears would make sense for them. The Bears had issues at center last year. In fact, Coleman Shelton, their center, is on this list, way down. This guy's a big step up in terms of play. I think Dahlman to the Bears will make a lot of sense.
Limited to just 9 games last season because of that ankle injury. Okay, we're speeding through this. Number 8 on your list, you have your cornerback for the Jets, DJ Reed. He is a feisty player out there, Pete.
Yeah, and again, differing opinions on him when I talk to personnel people. Some people love him. Some people think he's a little overrated. I think he's a really good player. He's a feisty, tough guy. Gets by with his, you know, not more than with his talent, than with his ability to play hard and play fast. Steelers would make sense. They need a corner. Their other corner, Jackson's also in this pool as a free agent. I think they need to get an upgrade there. DJ Reed would be an upgrade.
How's the safety market looking in this free agents class?
There are some good safeties in this market, and you know, you look at it, Javon Holland from Miami Dolphins. I mean, he's a guy, before this season, I thought he was on his way to superstardom, and he kind of stepped back a little bit this year. And I think that's maybe new defense, whatever. He wasn't as good. He was good. He just wasn't as good. I think this is a chance for him to rejuvenate his career, and the Colts would make some sense. They need help on the back end. They struggle back there, and one of their leading safeties, Julian Blackmon, is also an unrestricted free agent.
Just 24 years old. He's still a young pup when it comes to the guys in the league. At number 10, rounding out this top 10 list of your 100 free agents out there, where we could potentially see them going, we have Eagles linebacker Zach Bond out there.
And this is a great story. Think about it. He was an outside linebacker, took the 1-year deal to go to the Eagles. Vic Fangio moved him to inside and completely changed the way he played football. It was great. He was such a big part of what they did. Could, you know, rush the passer, could tackle, could cover, did a lot of great things. I think he could make sense for the Raiders. And the Raiders got to change things. Both their linebackers, you know, Divine Diablo and Robert Spillane, are both unrestricted free agents, so maybe Zach Bond would be a guy that could go to the Raiders as well.
150 tackles.
Great. It was a great season, and kudos. He should have been in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. That's how good he was.
Dang. All right, Pete Prisco with his top 10 free agents and potential landing spots. And we will be continuing the conversation of this NFL offseason all the time here on CBS Sports HQ as we take a look at some of the NFL upcoming dates. We have the franchise transition tag deadline. That's March 4th. Then that negotiating period starts the 10th through the 12th. And a free agency officially beginning 4 p.m. Eastern. Do you have that date start, Wells? March 12th?
Combine's in a week and 10 days. 10
okay,
days.
so we're not even thinking about that right now?
10 days.
All about the
10
combine.
days.
All about the scouting combine coming up February 24th through March 3rd.
Who says off season?
There's no off season.
Here we go with your Afternoon HQ. I'm Chris Hassel with Amanda Garrett, Danny Kanell, and Pete Prisco. Like, season ends, you'd think the NFL guys would be able to take a nice break. You know, the Eagles are celebrating. Everybody else is in Cabo. Pete Prisco somehow gets busier when the season ends. He's been grinding away for 2 days on a top 100 list.
2 days. More like about a week and a half.
I mean, that's hard. 100. You have to go
Everybody
through
was on
100.
Bourbon Street. Pete was just turning that.
Did you have any fun at the Super Bowl?
Yeah, but not as much as I should have because they begged me to do this because it's a month out. It's a
One month from today, free agency begins.
starts.
1 month from today, it's going to be on March 12th. So let's take a look. We're not going to go through all 100.
No.
We will take a look at the top 10. However, some interesting things going on here. Sam Darnold's coming in at number 1. The top receiver, T. Higgins, being number 2. 3, though, in the top 10, now belonging to the Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles. What do they do with all of their free agents? But we're going to start at the top with Sam Darnold there. Look, Pete, great regular season. Last game of the regular season, not good. Wild card game, not good. How do you evaluate him, and where do you think he should go, or should he end up staying with Vikings?
It's a tough evaluation because there's a history of him being just average at best. And then you have this, wonderful span of games where he was much better than average. And then you came to the games that mattered at the end, and he was average again. So it's a real tough evaluation. Does he turn into Sam Darnold again? That's the question. Usually in this league, you are what you are, and it doesn't usually go the other way. Well, it looked like it was going the other way, and then all of a sudden it went back the other way again. So I'm concerned about it. I do think he's going to get a good contract. I think he's going to end up with maybe the Raiders as the quarterback there.
Okay.
You have to go 50 slots down to find the next quarterback, and that's Justin Fields, Danny.
It's not a great class. Justin Fields, 26 years old. There's still a lot of potential in him, but his career's been derailed here playing for 2 different franchises. You had the bumpy start. At the start of the season, he was actually looking like he was playing okay, and then, of course, he gets benched for Russell Wilson because they want him more from the pass game. They didn't ask him to do a lot. I do think he needs an offense that will be specific to his skill set. And when I think of a comp that you could turn him into, maybe even Jalen Hurts, if he's given those type of weapons around him. Problem is, where is he going to find that?
Another quarterback coming in at number 88, Jameis Winston. And Pete, this is interesting because I think most people now, when they look at Jameis Winston, they think media celebrity.
Yeah.
But he still thinks he can be a starter.
Well, he thinks he could be a starter, and anybody who signs him as a starter is going to get a lot of that, a lot of good, but you're also going to get a lot of really bad. And that's just the Jameis Winston experience. That's what he is. He's a guy that's going to be able to hit the deep balls down the field, but he's also going to turn the ball over. So whoever gets him has to be ready for that.
Crazy, he's only 31. I thought he was like 36, 37. He's still
Only
young.
31 years old. It's crazy.
And speaking of an older quarterback,
Yeah, but Florida State quarterbacks age a lot worse than everybody else.
Russell Wilson, number 90, is he just a backup in your mind moving forward?
He is in my mind. I mean, look, we talked about it earlier, maybe a stopgap for a team that drafts a quarterback, but I think he's a backup. If he doesn't complete moon balls down the sideline, he's not doing much damage in the middle of the field.
So only 4 quarterbacks in Pete's top 100 free agent list and only 1 in the top 50, and that's Sam Darnold. And when you couple that with what's expected to be a very thin draft class as well, Danny, what kind of trouble are teams in that are in need of a quarterback this offseason?
And there's a few of them.
Yeah, there are a lot of them that are in there. It's not great, and that's why I think you see some mock drafts where you do see, teams passing on quarterbacks, and maybe they'll go with one of these bridge quarterbacks that are cheaper options, and then maybe draft a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round because you don't want to waste a draft pick. Maybe you could build around a guy like Sam Darnold or a Russell Wilson later in his career. It is not great. I do think, and I was kind of curious to know what you thought about this. Where would Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers fall on that list? Are they ahead of Sam Darnold? Do they go 1, 2?
No.
Are they still? So even with them in this class, it's still not great.
Where would you put him, Pete?
Probably ahead of
2,
3? Ahead of Fields,
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, but there's 50 slots there. I mean, we talking 20s, 30s?
40s, 40s,
Really?
low 40s. I mean, you got to remember age and injury. It's a major factor for both of them. So probably in the 40s and low, maybe 50, right above Fields. Here's the thing about this draft class, too, and the free agency class. Is there anybody that you can look at in that group and say, win because of and not win with?
No, but I do. With the thing, if I was a GM making these choices, I would probably go with the route of drafting somebody in this class. Maybe Jackson Dart later in the 1st. Maybe a Kyle McCord out of Syracuse who threw the ball really well. Take him in the 3rd. Get one of the maybe bring in Russell Wilson to be that bridge quarterback, and then use some of your draft capital, your 1st and 2nd round picks, to try to surround them. Kind of the Brock Purdy route that you go there of building around. Even the Jalen Hurts model. Get a quarterback a little bit later. Don't reach on these guys who I don't think are true top 10 players, even Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, who are really good, I think they'd probably be, back end of the first round, second half of the first round in a normal year. But teams are going to reach on them. I would really use patience and say maybe get one of those other rookies, because there are some quarterbacks just below them that are pretty good value potentially.
And next year's quarterback class might be pretty good. So you can, if you want to put it off for a year and grab a bridge quarterback and draft a guy at a different position that you really like, maybe you do that. Or if you're Tennessee, you sign one of these quarterbacks, you sign Sam Darnold, and then you use the first pick on, maybe a pass rusher.
Okay, so let's look at some of these teams that have decisions to make when it does come to the quarterback position. Where do they go? Is it free agency? Is it the draft to find someone? Let's start with the Steelers. You have two quarterbacks. We're now familiar with that system in Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. Pete, where do you think the Steelers should turn to find their next quarterback?
What I would do, I would bring back Fields, not on a mega deal. I'd bring back Fields on a deal and draft a quarterback, like maybe in the third round, like I mentioned, McCord. And my preliminary, I haven't done all the work on these guys yet, but the preliminary on him is I like him as a third-round quarterback. So I think that's what I would do. I would bring back Fields and then draft one. And again, if you go into next year and it happens that Fields isn't the answer and McCord goes in and plays and he looks lost, then you got to go back in and do it again. But at least this gives you options for this season.
The one thing I don't know is, what do the Steelers think of Justin Fields? They did bench him in favor of Russell Wilson. We saw that version. What type of preparation, what type of leadership skills does he have? As long as he passes those tests, I totally agree with you, because I do think you can build with him. And I also agree with you that you draft somebody in the second or third round to try to compete with him. Then you've got some depth and you have some options in case it doesn't work on. I think what will be interesting is the market for Justin Fields. Like, what number will the Steelers be willing to pay? And would somebody else be out there willing to outpay him or overpay him? I don't think so. So I think the Steelers might have a pretty good bargain here with Justin Fields.
Any chance they don't bring back either one of these free agent quarterbacks?
There's a chance. There's a chance. But I think when you look at it on the surface, you have to bring one of them back. Yeah, and even if you're going to draft one, you need to have a veteran quarterback in there. That's why I think Fields makes more sense. He's only 26.
All right, let's move on to the New York Jets. Of course, the Aaron Rodgers situation. They're expected to move on from him. Pete, I know you said that you thought that they should keep him because what are the other options, like we've talked about? So what are the options for New York?
I don't know, and they don't know. They can't have the Tyrod Taylor's there, but is that the answer? I mean, is that the long-term answer? It's a stopgap. I think this is more of a culture-setting move than anything than it comes from a football standpoint. Because I'll be honest with you, the last 4 or 5 games of the year, Aaron Rodgers started to look a little bit more like Aaron Rodgers. He was removed from that injury. He probably never admit this, but the injury looked like it impacted him early in the season. Then he started becoming more comfortable with it, and he played better. So I think this is more of, I'm the new guy in town, I'm Aaron Glenn, I'm going to do it my way, I'm not allowing him to be on my team kind of culture setting than it is from a football standpoint, because what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Who are you playing with?
I thought Aaron Rodgers towards the back end of the season was playing, as good as we've seen him post this injury. He did start to look healthy. If I'm Aaron Glenn, though, I do want to sit down with Aaron Rodgers and say, all right, you've rediscovered yourself. How far are you willing to go? As far as maybe taking a pay cut, restructuring your deal.
They already told him they're sending him packing.
Right, they're going to pass on him. So I don't know what the Jets are going to do. They're probably going to have to draft somebody and sign somebody, because I agree with you, Tyrod Taylor's probably not the answer either. There are some quarterback needy teams out there.
One that we're not sure is quarterback needy quite yet is the Rams. We're waiting to kind of find out what happens there. Initially, it was talk about potentially Matthew Stafford retiring. Now it's, could they potentially trade him, moving on from him and Cooper Kupp at the same time? So, Danny, if you're the Rams, what are you doing about a quarterback position?
Then you're totally resetting if you do that. Again, I would probably try to bring Matthew Stafford back, talk him into, hey, let's try to run it back one more year, but you have to make sure he's invested. I mean, that is one thing to mentally get yourself ready to go through the grind of an NFL season, a 17-game season, with the amount of injuries that Stafford's had to deal with of recent history. But he was a guy, too, I thought looked pretty fresh, like towards the back. They figured out the offensive line. He started to look a little bit better. So I would probably say, and I know they potentially could move on from him, but I would say maybe try to run it back one more time with Matthew Stafford, give it your one best effort, and then look towards the future. Maybe draft somebody in the third or fourth round that could learn under him But until then, I would try to talk Stafford into coming back.
I would try and talk him to coming back, too. I thought he played well down there. They almost beat the Eagles on the road in the snow. Remember, he brought them back in that game. And I do think that he can still play at a high level. They need to get faster. I mean, let's be real. They're a slow football. That's why Cooper Kupp's not going to be with them anymore. They need to get faster. They get faster. He can still throw the football down the field. What do you play with if you don't have him? I mean, that's the concern right there. Is what are you playing with? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo was there, and oh boy, I mean, you're not going to play with him. So, you know what they should do? You're going to laugh at me when I say this. They should bring him back, and they should find a way to bring Will Levis in and let him learn from him.
Learn under Stafford.
Correct.
It'd be great for Will Levis.
Yes.
Get him a fresh. He needs to kind of take a breather, get out of a situation that's been bad.
I'm telling you, big arm quarterback can learn from him.
You're not giving up on Levis
no,
yet,
I'm
huh?
not.
Oh, I thought you were out on him.
4 different coordinators in 4 years. That's tough to handle.
I don't hate it. I like it because he'd be on the bench. You don't have to see. but I actually do think it would be a place that he could actually catch his breath, learn, watch a true pro who's got his, Stafford's a great teammate. He knows how to play the game. I think it really help him.
All right, you guys are sticking around because when we come back, we're going to be delving into what the Chiefs and Eagles need to do this offseason. They will give us their path to a potential rubber match between these two in another Super Bowl down the road, but things have to be done.